You remember that whole thing about Joe Rogan saying the N-word, misinformation about COVID, horse dewormer? Yeah. Throughout that time period, he says that he gained about 2 million subscribers. I think that's amazing. If that is true, just kind of goes to show people can kind of filter through and figure out what they think is true and maybe what they think is relevant. Spotify can too. Spotify is saying, let's keep Joe Rogan. The Obamas and their ridiculous podcast, not as much. They've got this podcast called Higher Ground or some conglomerate. They want to be on a higher level of podcasting than everybody else because it's, former president. People seem to like Michelle Obama for some reason. I'm not really sure why. But Spotify is saying, yeah, we're not going to renew your contract. We don't want to do business with you. Is it because when you go woke, you go broke? Is that it? CNN minus style? Is that it? Or, let's be reasonable. We're reasonable here, right? Is it because their podcast just didn't make sense with the amount of money they're being offered? We're going to cover all these topics. Stay tuned. Let's get into it. Before we do, if you're new here, welcome. My name is Sean Reynolds. I own a couple of real estate companies. And why wouldn't I be talking to you about Joe Rogan, the Obamas, the N-word, 2 million subscribers, misinformation? That's what we're doing. All right. We are reading from a sporting 𝐍𝐞𝐚𝐬𝐬 of MMA. We're on an MMA channel right now. Who is a better source for anything Joe Rogan than an MMA channel? You know what I mean? That's where Rogan is. That's his roots besides Fear Factor. And so let's get to the bottom of this. What's going on? The UFC color commentator Joe Rogan has made an enormous name for himself with his infamous Joe Rogan Experience podcast. Is it really infamous? I mean, a lot of people are pissed off at Joe Rogan because he tells the truth and they don't want it to be told. They don't want another avenue of information to get out there. CNN was brutal towards Joe Rogan. Brutal. Just lied up. They lied straight up and they lied repeatedly and they came back and they lied. A lot of people don't know that. They're just like, CNN has a different angle. Yeah, the lying kind. CNN minus. How'd that work out? So this podcast not only changed Rogan's life, but also paved the way for other podcasts. So isn't it interesting that we don't call it the $100 million podcast? We call the Joe Rogan Experience, exclusively licensed on Spotify, the $200 million podcast? Because that's probably what it's worth. I bet you it's worth way more than that. Just the income stream capitalized, it's more than 200 million. The game-changing podcast moved from YouTube to Spotify. It resulted when Spotify and Rogan made a humongous $200 million deal for rights to the streaming podcast. This year, the podcast host saw many famous artists protesting against him. So stupid. So stupid. Let's talk about some of the stupid people doing that. Was it Joni Mitchell? Was it Neil Young? Was it some other has-beens that have no input on anything? Do you remember when every time you turned around, you'd see somebody else is pulling their stuff off of Spotify, but they didn't pull it all off and they didn't pull it off permanently because they make too much money and they realized, oh yeah, I'm not making any money if my stuff isn't on Spotify. That whole protest Joe Rogan thing, I mean, we made our point. Let's get going. Need to get paid again. Got stuff I need to buy. So a bunch of has-been entertainers basically pulled their stuff off of Spotify and said, if he's on here, we can't be on here. The powers that be at Spotify made the right call and kept their number one performer in the world on their platform, as you should. The demand of banning the podcast from Spotify had people divided. No, not really. No, actually they did. The demand of banning the podcast from Spotify had people divided. People were demanding that Joe Rogan be taken off. not after 200 million. No sirree. However, Spotify stuck by its most lucrative podcast. Imagine that. And although deleted some controversial episodes and added guidelines before the podcast, Spotify didn't remove Rogan from its platforms. Recently, however, former United States President Barack Obama and his wife's production company saw a snub from the streaming giant. Hence, many people are reacting to Spotify, keeping Rogan and banning the Obamas. I've read into this. I've looked into this. It's a business deal, right? The Obamas don't have the number one podcast in the world. The Obamas wanted to do more than just an exclusive with Spotify. They wanted to branch out. They wanted to do some other stuff. Spotify is like, for as much as you want and for as much as you want to work as far as creating numbers of podcasts, they were willing to be in 8 episodes. Okay. So that's the way I understood it anyway. 8 episodes, get paid a lot of money, and then have a bunch of other people come on, but have the Obamas be the main driving factor here. Well, now the world is going, no Obamas, but yes on Joe Rogan. And that really upsets people on the left because they were the prime people. They were like, you got to cancel Joe Rogan. He provides misinformation about COVID. Got to get him out of here. Said the N-word back in 1845. You know what I mean? It's just like, give the guy a break. He didn't say the N-word out of just straight up racism. He said it in the context of somebody else saying it. Either which way, white middle-aged dude can't say the N-word. That's the bottom line. If you take nothing else, just don't say it. And that's why I'm not on Twitter for a lot of this stuff, because everything gets taken out of context and you just get crazy stuff, right? So here's Spotify. Now we're going to get into a bunch of tweets. So people are tired of leftist propaganda and don't want to pay for it. First CNN Plus, now the Obamas. The tide surely seems to be turning as more and more consumers speak with their money. And that's Tim Young talking about Spotify dumping the Obamas. Maybe they didn't dump the Obamas. They couldn't come to an arrangement. But the Obamas not being on Spotify and Joe Rogan being there, I think that's amusing. I think it's kind of fitting, isn't it? Well, Joe Rogan has a real podcast. The Obamas? Have you listened to it? It's really not that interesting. I never found the Obamas interesting anyway. So Matt Stoller, he said, keeping Joe Rogan and firing Obama. Okay, so then we've got a bunch of that. Let's get down to some of the stuff. Here's Afshine Emrani, whatever. Just in the last few weeks, Spotify dropped its deal with Barack and Michelle Obama while keeping Joe Rogan. CNN Plus is set to shut down only a month after launching. Netflix stock down 40%. Disney is looking at special status in Florida. Now Disney is losing its special tax status in Florida. Left getting chewed up. It's kind of how it looks, isn't it? Yeah. Go woke, get broke. So let's take a quick peek at the Obama's Higher Ground will not renew its Spotify partnership. Here's what we got going on. Barack and Michelle Obama's podcasting deal with Spotify for their company Higher Ground is ending. All right. Higher Ground will not be renewing. It's looking for a different partner. The production company is in negotiations with multiple distributors for its future efforts, such as Amazon's Audible and iHeartMedia. Okay. With hopes of finding a new partner in the coming weeks. So they're going to pop up on somewhere else. It's just the whole comparison is, it kept Joe and these other people, former president and, Michelle Obama, whom everybody seems to love, not so much. And the Obama's deal with Higher Ground is potentially worth tens of millions of dollars. Notice they don't say hundreds because it's not. Required exclusivity could have been one issue with regard to the failed Spotify negotiations. One of the things Higher Ground is aiming for with its next deal is to no longer be bound to one platform and instead release episodes across streaming services. All right. And Spotify wants an exclusive, so that's not going to happen. But the former president also recently entered the fight against disinformation. President Obama basically came out and said, yep, I'd like to censor more stuff in the name of disinformation. That to me was like, okay, of course you would. You're on the left. So why wouldn't you? That seems totally Totally amazing, right? And you got Elon Musk buying up Twitter, and people just freaking out. This isn't going to be good for free speech, even though Elon Musk just completely dials in what he wants to change, and he's basically free speech. Make it more transparent. Truth telling, which the left always talks about doing, and yet when it comes down to it, in reality, it's the last thing they want. They just want their perspective out there, and the right wants it too. But the way that the whole, corporate censorship and social media censorship has gone, it's been wildly one-sided. To a Higher Grounds podcast, the Michelle Obama podcast, and Renegades, Born in the USA. That was with Bruce Springsteen. Can you believe that? That's ridiculous. Don't ever listen to it. Don't listen to Bruce Springsteen. He babbles on about nothing. Higher Grounds wished to provide opportunities for other creators, but Spotify wanted more content directly involving the Obamas. They wanted more episodes with the Obamas because that's the bread and butter there. These other artists, who cares? Nobody cares. You're not coming to them from there. When you go to the Joe Rogan Experience on Spotify, you're going to go see Joe Rogan. Spotify knows that with the Obamas. And if the Obamas aren't willing to put in more work, you know what? We'll probably just move on and we'll just, get somebody else. Because guess what? There's more content creators out there. There isn't more Joe Rogans. Let's talk about Joe Rogan. Let's talk about him. I want to read this. This is funny. Joe Rogan claims Spotify controversy led to 2 million in subscriber growth. Uh-oh, my computer just flicked. That's not good. Rogan made headlines after video surfaced of him using the N-word. Notice how they focus on that. They tried to get him out of there with the whole COVID disinformation thing. Hey, you used horse dewormer. No, I got a prescription from a doctor, a people doctor, not an animal doctor. Anyway, Joe Rogan, he says to use horse dewormer. That is literally how that went with CNN. And if you're getting any type of content from CNN on a regular basis, you might want to rethink that. A lot of people have. It's called CNN minus. Joe Rogan's online controversy regarding his use of the N-word and his opinions on COVID-19 apparently didn't deter potential subscribers. Rogan, because people know that's a bunch of nonsense. Rogan, who hosts the Joe Rogan Experience on Spotify, claimed that he gained subscribers during the controversies. You have been put through the ringer since we last met, Murray told Rogan. That's his guest commentator, British political commentator Douglas Murray. You've been put through the ringer since we last met, Murray told Rogan, seemingly referencing the online attempts to cancel Rogan. They did a number on you. Wow. Here's Rogan. It's interesting. My subscriptions went up massively. That's what's crazy, Rogan said. During the height of it all, I gained 2 million subscribers. And how did CNN minus do? Yeah, they're out of business. That's not good. That means they're not competing. Yeah, the media went for it. It's also fortunate that the people who went for it were CNN. Yeah, they were, weren't they? And then CNN minus, how's that? Oh, yeah, they're gone, right? They're so untrustworthy. This is what Rogan says about CNN and CNN minus and anybody affiliated with CNN. They're so untrustworthy and people know how biased they are and socially weird their anchors are. Socially weird. It's true. It's true, right? When you turn it to CNN, if you ever do that, I do, just because I want to see what the storylines are there. So I can take that and flip it around, and that's probably your truth, right? I mean, that's just what you do. And so Rogan is saying their anchors are socially weird. They are, aren't they? Yeah, they are. It's like, how could you get your news source from these people? Now, people on the left might say, how could you ever listen to Tucker Carlson? All right, if he's not your cup of tea, all right, I get that. Yeah, maybe he's not. But I feel like a lot of the stuff that comes out of Fox is, for the most part, correct. And CNN, there's some storylines there that are just wildly straight up wrong. Wrong. You hear them talking about stuff and it's like, okay, that's not the deal here. And yet you keep going down that road. I feel like people have caught on to that and they are understanding, you know what? Maybe we're not getting the full scoop here. Maybe we're not getting half the scoop. So if Joe Rogan did take on 2 million subscribers, I say Good for Joe Rogan. Good for his business model. Good for Spotify. I think it's great that Spotify didn't take him off the platform, but with 200 million invested, I don't think that was ever a reality. You had a bunch of whiny people at Spotify who identify by wildly different sexes. And there's only a handful of them, but they make a lot of noise. And they just got shut down. They just got put in their place. Hey, you know what? We're going to keep Joe because he makes money. You cost us money. Your salary, we're overpaying you. You cost us money. You're not making us money. Joe over here, yeah, he's our bread and butter. So we're going to run with him. You stop talking because you don't know what you're talking about. We need to get Joe out of here. Joe's the worst guy ever as he gains 2 million subscribers. Interesting, right? Yeah. So that's how that one went. The Obama's gone. But I believe the Obama's leaving Spotify is more about analysis of a business decision. And that has to do with, I think, a lot of these entities on the left and their business dealing with their hosts and whatnot. Ethan, what's Ethan's name of H3 is the podcast. He's kind of he leans heavy to the left. And I've watched a lot of his podcasts over the years. He's really annoying. His sponsor basically just cut him off at the knees. And people told him, hey, this is going to happen. It's going to happen. He's got his wife on there. You know the guy. I'm sure you do. Maybe you don't. I watch a really wide assortment of stuff so I can see different people's styles and see where they're coming up with storylines, see what they're focusing on. So I watch a lot of left stuff. I admittedly do, because I think if you don't, then you don't know where that middle ground is. And that's what I try and hone on. So hopefully you come to me for something in the middle. I lean more to the right, but there's some stuff on the left that makes sense. Very little. Every now and then. Once a quarter, once a year, back in 2018. I don't know. Yeah. Anyway, Joe still doing his thing, 2 million. The Obamas, who cares what happens to them? Because I don't find their podcasts entertaining. I mean, maybe their content, if that's your thing, is just not entertaining. Joe Rogan, he wades into some of the deepest topics of all time. And he's a UFC guy. He's a Fear Factor guy. He's a mixed martial arts guy, right? He's a UFC guy. He's a smoke weed all the time guy. You know, the origins of his podcast upset a lot of people because he got on there and he just smoked a ton of weed. He just got on there and lit it up and just let her rip. You know, decade, 12 years later, #1 podcast in the world. I think it's great. Go, Joe. Obamas don't really care what happens to you. I think a lot of other people don't either, because otherwise Spotify would have said, yeah, we'll figure something out. We'll make this work. We'll get you in here. Sign on the dotted line. All right, that's it for me. Thanks so much for being here. We'll catch up in the next one. Bye for now.